Warning. In the following episode, topics such as domestic and sexual abuse and sexual assault will be mentioned and discussed as part of this week's film review. Listeners who are sensitive to these topics should proceed with caution. Diane, 11:30 a.m., April 22nd. Starting the podcast episode for Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. I've never seen so many David Lynch film bros in my life. 54 degrees on a slightly overcast day. When I get back to HQ, let's discuss movies over some damn fine coffee. Cooper out. For those of you who are not fluent in Twin Peak references, hello and welcome. I'm not sure how you all will do with this episode, but I invite you to enjoy and listen nonetheless. You're listening to Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, a freshly brewed coffee and movie review podcast for you. My name is Nick Delaney, and I'm your show host, movie critic, lover of damn fine coffees, and the person who will be shutting up about Twin Peaks after this episode. Now, please check to see if you have a fish in the percolator, because this week we are brewing up a damn fine coffee martini, this episode's coffee review. And of course, we'll be pairing that with our special screening of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, directed by David Lynch. In case that's not enough, this week I'm also joined by extra special guest Harrison. Stay until the very end of today's episode to hear about what Harrison and I thought about meeting Cheryl Lee, the star of Fire Walk with Me. Please take a seat, stay a while, and let's not talk about Judy over some coffee. In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy at all. But first, it is happening again. That's right, I am once again telling you to please follow at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram and TikTok, and at Coffee Nick Pick on X. There you can find show updates like new releases, movie discussions, damn fine coffee pictures, and much, much more. Again, that's at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. How are we all doing? How are we doing? Are we remembering to take a moment for ourselves? I hope so. I am a firm believer that every day you need to take a moment to yourself to check in, and I think the best way to do that is by just treating yourself to something. So, even if you're working a long day at work, or if things seem very busy, reserve some time in the day for you. Go see that movie alone. Go take yourself to that coffee shop you've always wanted to go to. Don't let not having someone to go to a movie with prevent you from going to see that movie. I am a huge proponent of doing things alone. Don't wait for someone else. If you want to do it, go do it. So I hope you all are doing well. My new job is going well. I am having a blast working with Canva all day. If you know me, you know I love doing everything on Canva, and also doing a little bit of fun writing. So it's going well. The commute is a lot, but look at me. I'm getting this episode out on time, so that's good. And I've already tried so many new coffee places in DC, and there's so many more to try. It seems like an infinite number. So I'm very excited to talk about those coffee shops on this show. This is the episode we've all been waiting for. And by we, I mean me. In case you cannot already tell, there will be a lot of really weird Twin Peaks references. I just did several in this little opening blurb. So please forgive me if you have not seen the show. I know it seems like I'm talking crazy, but I promise that they are references. If you have not seen the show, as always, I highly encourage it. This episode will not make a lot of sense without seeing the show, but I would still love for you all to listen. It's still going to be a great ride, and we have a special guest today, so it's very exciting. In case you want to listen, but you don't want to hear spoilers, I do explicitly mention later on in the episode when we start talking about spoilers. So feel free to listen up to there. And I hope you have a great time listening to this episode. There are a lot of special things about it. So I hope you're just as excited as me. Now, there is a lot to discuss today. So without any further delay, I think it's time to enter the town of Twin Peaks. In today's episode, I'm ecstatic to welcome a very special guest. This guest was a production assistant on the first season of Apple TV Plus's Swagger and is currently working as a production assistant for the upcoming feature film Atlantis. He knows everything there is to know about movies, has seen just about every single one of them, and is in the process of making a few of his own. Also, he is your go-to Twin Peaks fan and has analyzed every confusing and weird thing about that show. For our Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me episode and coffee review, please welcome Harrison.
Hello, hello. It is an honor to be here. I'm such a big fan of the pod.
Oh, thank you so much, Harrison. So, enough about movies. What is your favorite coffee?
Favorite coffee? We're talking like brand of coffee or coffee drink?
Coffee drink.
Ooh, I'm pretty simple. I like an Americano or like a cold brew. But in terms of like a local place, I love Blanchard's in Richmond as well as Afterglow.
Very nice,
Yeah.
very nice. I have not tried those, so if you're in the Richmond area, definitely give those places a try.
Highly recommend.
Now, Harrison is not only joining us for our movie today, which is Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, he is also joining us for our coffee review. And speaking of that, now brewing is the Damn Fine Coffee Martini from Alamo Drafthouse. This martini was a special drink that was offered by Alamo for their Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me screening. And in the drink is Tito's handmade vodka, Owen's nitro-infused espresso, and coffee beans as a garnish. Now, Harrison, do you think that this represents the coffee that Special Agent Dale Cooper drank in Twin Peaks?
Ooh, that is a good question, Nick. Not really.
Not really.
Now, I enjoyed this drink. I did. But I also will enjoy any espresso martini you put in my hands. Was this a particularly strong one? Maybe not. I enjoyed it though. I think Cooper also would have enjoyed it. But he likes his coffee a bit stronger. As Audrey says, Cooper likes his coffee black.
She did say that. I don't think that Cooper would ever drink alcohol on the job. He's a good agent of the Bureau, as he would say. So I don't think this is for him, and I don't think it's for me either. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. First of all, I want to state the good. I love that they did this. So there was the Damn Fine Coffee Martini, and then not coffee related, they had a drink called the Red Room. And that was Gosling's Black Seal Rum, Campari, Cherry Heering, Sweet Vermouth, and Salt. I needed to pronounce those on multiple tries, so I edited those out. So I love that Alamo made these special drinks for the viewing. They definitely got my attention, and I love this attention to detail, and they just made the experience more special. So thank you, Alamo, for doing that. But talking a little bit more, what other thoughts did you have about the Damn Fine Espresso Martini?
No, I agree with what you were saying. It was really cool that they did this for the showing today. This was my first time ever going to an Alamo, so it was really cool to see them have all of these advertisements prior to the movie showcasing Twin Peaks. And to have the drink with it was a fun little surprise. The drink itself, like I said before, it's just like a solid espresso martini. I did not read that there were coffee beans in it until I was drinking it halfway through the movie, and I was like, "Oh, what is in my mouth?" Um, but I did enjoy it.
Good. Yeah, I'm sorry that the coffee beans were a little bit of a surprise.
It was a surprise. It did take me a little back. But other than that, I enjoyed the drink. I didn't really taste what else was in it.
Yeah, I'm really not much of a fan of mixing my alcohol with my coffee. So this is probably the only coffee martini review I'll do on this show. And so I haven't tried it that much, so I don't have much to gauge this coffee martini on. But I will say that I did not enjoy it. I think that it was very like watery almost. It actually didn't really have any flavor at all. So that was surprising, especially because drinking the drink, it had such a nice aroma. Like it was really like creamy and it had like this vanilla scent. So I thought I would be drinking something like really rich and delicious, but it just kind of was nothing. It tasted like just water with alcohol almost. So I did not love it.
I agree. I think it could have used like a splash of Kahlua or some Baileys or some other sort of coffee liqueur that could have just made the coffee stand out a little more than it did. Kind of just tasted like vodka with a hint of coffee.
Yeah, and maybe it was more so a coffee problem and not exactly like an alcohol problem. Maybe just like they don't have good espresso or there's just something wrong with the coffee there. But I don't know. I don't want to put that against Alamo, but maybe it's just a drink we had. I don't know. So for that reason, I'm giving the damn fine coffee martini from Alamo Draft House the Nick Nicks.
And I am giving it the Nick Mix because once again, it was an espresso martini, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, so far on a scale of espresso martinis, this is only the second one I've ever had. The first one I had was on Coffee Nick's 21st birthday, and I did yak in the passenger seat of my best friend's car on the ride home. And so far, I have not yacked yet. Even though Fire Walk with Me did make me want to do that, I haven't. So we're doing well here. I think this is like a step up, but it's still not a good step.
Yeah, progress, but we're not there quite yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So get your damn fine coffee in hand because we are heading straight for the coffee thought. And this week, we're talking about movie discourse. So we're having discourse about discourse. Are you keeping up? Are you following? Because we're going there. So recently, in the past week, the trailer for Joker 2 Folie à Deux was released, and there is a lot of discourse online about this trailer, more specifically about Lady Gaga in the trailer, and then even more specifically about the final shot of the trailer where Harley Quinn draws the red smile over the glass and it focuses on Joaquin Phoenix's mouth and it looks like a smile. So there's a lot of discourse happening. Some people are saying that this is the greatest shot in the history of cinema. Others are like, it doesn't mean anything. I would say that, removing the discourse from this trailer, it's a cool shot. I like it. It was a cool trailer overall. I'm very excited for this movie. As you know, I love and will eat up any sort of Batman content, but something about the discourse here is not sitting right with me. Harrison, what were your thoughts on the Joker 2 trailer?
I agree with most of what you said. I am not the biggest fan of the original Joker, but I've been looking forward to this due to the involvement of Lady Gaga, as many of us are.
Yeah.
And upon hearing that it would be a musical, which is a pretty big departure from the original. So, I had certain expectations going into the trailer, and the trailer, it impressed me for the most part. I thought visually it looked great. Lady Gaga looks like she's having fun. You know, she's committed to the bit.
Yeah.
Every movie, House of Gucci, American Horror Story, doesn't matter what it is, she commits.
Right. Right.
So I'm looking forward to it. The discourse revolving the shot at the end. I think it is a solid shot. Is it remarkable? Perhaps not. I've seen some people compare it to the shot in Paris, Texas. If you've seen Paris, Texas, you know what shot I'm talking about. And I don't think it quite reaches that level. But I mean, it's fitting with what the movie is. It fits Joker. But once again, the internet loves to take things out of control. And it's doing that now with this.
Yeah, so there's a lot of moments with this trailer that have been had, particularly on twitter.com, now known as x.com, to the dismay of me. Um, so, there is one tweet specifically that I'm thinking of, but it's like, Lady Gaga draws red smile on glass, glass fades away from Phoenix, glass fades back in on Phoenix, smile is over Phoenix's mouth. Movie history. That wasn't a direct quote, but that's basically what it was. And there was another clip I saw on Twitter where someone was reacting to the trailer and they got to the part with the smile on the glass and they were reacting really well to it. I think as most of us were, and they were like, "Now, what would you call this? Is this like the director's idea?" And so a lot of people are responding to like those sorts of tweets and saying, stay in school, or people need to be movie literate to talk about movies, and or media literate to talk about movies. And these are very extreme takes. What do you think?
Well, this issue is kind of similar to the issue I had when the first Joker came out, the discourse revolving that movie. Um, quickly it became this very in the front center of the culture at the time. It became like people said the movie was dangerous. It just had a certain energy to it when it was released, and then it shortly after entered the award season that year, and became, I believe, the most nominated film at the Oscars that year. So I think that is partially why people are taking this movie so seriously, and I don't know if this movie or the original was intending to be taken quite so seriously as it is. It's obviously trying to be a more elevated superhero film, and it's paying homage to older films, like the original with Taxi Driver, King of Comedy, and this one seems to be with like 50s, 60s musicals. In saying that, I do think, I mean, it's Todd Phillips. This is the guy who did The Hangover and like Hangover Part 2. I
Right.
don't I am not going into this movie, walking out like a new person, like people say, like a lot
An
of movies.
art house
Yeah,
experience. Yeah.
exactly. And I think if we go into it thinking that everyone's gonna be more negative towards it, then maybe they have a right to be. Um,
Right. Yeah, and I like what you said that it's almost like these Joker movies are parodying older films. Joker was very Taxi Driver and Network, and this one I think is more like La La Land, sort of like that. So this is nothing groundbreaking. I think it's really cool that we're like putting well-known IP and characters into sort of these roles. Because we would have. I think it's cool to like explore the character of Joker and Harley Quinn like this, especially as a Batman fan. But we are not witnessing anything groundbreaking. It's very cool, it's very exciting, but this is not movie history, I don't think.
no,
Maybe it
no,
will be. I haven't seen Joker 2 yet, but
no. And I think part of why we're talking about this and why we're reacting to it the way we are is because the internet has the discourse has been pretty insane already, and the trailer's been out a week.
very polarized.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the internet does, especially in this day and age. Everybody has an opinion on everything. And they like to put their voice out there as loud as they possibly can. And maybe they don't always need to have an opinion about every single trailer or film that is released.
This is film 101. Movies are for everyone. They are for everyone to have their own interpretation on, but I think the internet has allowed people to, or empowered people to feel like they need to share their opinions with everyone, and everyone needs to listen to those opinions. I think it's great that people are excited about movies, but for someone to make a reaction video that isn't really contributing anything to the conversation, it makes me think like, okay, this discussion, it feels like it doesn't need to be had. I think that some movies just don't need to be discussed. They just need to be enjoyed. There's so much exhausting discussion happening around a film that none of us have seen yet. People are saying like this isn't a masterpiece or this is a masterpiece and all these different things. None of you have even watched it. What's happening? Where are we? Like,
Exactly.
just shut up. So if you want to know my thoughts on the trailer, it is summarized by one tweet credited to at Ducky Swiss on X. This is going to be the longest 6 months of our life waiting for this movie because people are going to be talking about it and arguing about it endlessly.
Agreed. Agreed. I mean, we saw what the discourse was like for the first Joker, and that was one of the more polarizing films we've seen in the past decade, I would say. But don't get me wrong, I am very happy to see people talking about a movie, especially. I mean, we were discussing earlier how it felt like for several years people were only watching, Marvel films and the big blockbusters that were released. And obviously, Joker is IP, it is a comic book movie. But it is operating in a different lane. And in general, I feel like we're seeing people discuss all movies, not just superheroes, more often, with movies like Dune and Saltburn, which was another film where the discourse quickly went out of control, um, as well as Civil War, yet another film where the discourse is getting pretty crazy as it approaches its release. So it's exciting to see these movies reach the culture and to actually have discussions about them. But at the same time, everyone seems to think they already have a fully realized opinion on something before it's even been released. And that's probably where the issue lies, especially considering a lot of the people who are discussing these movies might not even actually end up seeing them.
I think the lesson to learn here is that people just want good movies. And I think that, some of these movies, and I don't think Joker 2 is an art house movie, but some of these art house movies are making it into the mainstream. And people want good movies. So I think we're starting to see the mainstream is starting to have discourse and discussion more over what production studios might have intended to be art house. And so I think something interesting is happening in the film industry right now. I think a lot more people are starting to get their hands on, movies that they might not have come across before. I think we're going to see that with Challengers, weirdly enough,
Yeah.
and several movies coming out this summer probably. But there's no Marvel movies. There's no like big box office, guaranteed sellout movie coming up. So I think people are going to start seeing other movies
Yeah.
and adding their voices to the conversations of other movies.
Yeah, and even with this most recent Oscar season, I saw a lot more discussion about the films than I had in prior years. Even films like Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall. There were a lot of young people going out to see those movies. I remember there was some sort of box office report, and I might not be saying this completely accurately, but like a very large percentage of the box office for those films was from people under 30. And that
Wow.
was very exciting to see people going out to see these movies. Obviously, those movies I just named are making far less money than the movies that we're talking about, such as Joker 2. But still, it is an exciting time. And I do think a large part of that could be in part to Letterbox, a social media app that has kind of taken over the film industry in a way. And I also feel that Letterbox is part of what is giving people this feeling that they have a voice to communicate their thoughts on these films. Everyone's become a critic in a way.
Right, right. So I'm not saying that these people shouldn't interact with movies, should not add their voice to the conversation. I just think we're witnessing something interesting. I think that movies are for everyone, and everyone's got a thought on a movie, but who should be publicizing those thoughts, and what thoughts should we be giving a platform to is the main idea here.
The final thing I want to say is just that everyone should go see these movies and form their own opinion um,
Yes.
before reading the internet and forming one before they even see the film.
Watch the movie before you look at the reviews, please, because it even like subconsciously affects what you think of the movie when you see a review beforehand. Enough of that. I think it's time to get into the main event of today. On today's episode, a very special now showing Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is a sequel film to the series Twin Peaks. So I want to summarize the series first just to give an idea of what is happening within this world. Twin Peaks follows the aftermath of the brutal murder of Laura Palmer, a small town sweetheart and homecoming queen. Special FBI agent Dale Cooper arrives to the town of Twin Peaks to work with the local sheriff's office in investigating the murder, and, in doing so, unravels a complex and sinister side to the small town. Now, before we get into the film itself, I want to know your thoughts on the show. It is a trip. There were two seasons that aired in, I believe, 1991 and 1992. And then the third season was sort of a revival, reboot, sequel season, and that's known as Twin Peaks The Return, or season 3, and that was released 25 years later in 2017. So, Harrison, just briefly and overall, what are your thoughts on the series Twin Peaks?
Yeah, I mean, I am saying all of this as a pretty big David Lynch fanboy, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I adore this show, and I believe it's one of the greatest things we've ever had on screen. Just what David Lynch is able to do within those 3 seasons is so innovative and experimental. Pretty much after the end of each season, you rethink the totality of Twin Peaks, and that's what's so interesting about it to me. So I first watched Twin Peaks in high school, but at the time I only watched the first 3 episodes upon my mother's recommendation. She was a massive fan of the show when it was airing. And I liked it, but I didn't quite get it at the time. And then when I was in college, my roommate at the time was watching the show. And one night when I came home, the episode he was watching is the episode where the killer is revealed. So obviously, that got me invested. That episode is incredibly upsetting without giving anything away. And I went through and I started the show from the beginning, and I completely fell in love with it. I fell under its spell. Um, every time you watch Twin Peaks, you really do feel transported. And I think that's something that's said of a lot of media, but it's something that's actually true when it comes to this show. So shortly after I watched the first 2 seasons, I of course had to watch Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which we were going to discuss in great detail shortly. And then season 3, Twin Peaks The Return. Twin Peaks The Return is a totally different beast that I would say I had a difficult time with at the beginning and then quickly fell in love with. It was a completely different tone, and we don't have a lot of the same characters as the first 2 seasons. But what it has is a certain energy that the first 2 seasons had as well, and that David Lynch brings to all of his projects. And I think that's what kept me glued to it till the end for all 18 episodes. And like Nick mentioned in my introduction, I am an aspiring filmmaker myself. And since watching Twin Peaks, I constantly find myself referencing the series in many ways. There's just so much that David Lynch does in Twin Peaks that I think all creators can take away from, in world building, but also in the character work as well. I think it would be really easy to lose the characters in a show that has this big of a scope, but I don't believe David Lynch ever really does. Even in season 3, where you're juggling a lot of different plot lines, and maybe not every character is given the same level of attention, he's always trying to do something interesting.
Speaking of that, who would you say is your favorite character from the show? Besides
Oh,
Dale Cooper.
oh, besides Dale Cooper.
Yeah, because I know that's your answer, but you can
Oh
talk about
no.
him
Okay,
if
well,
you want.
first, we gotta talk about Dale. We got
Yeah,
to talk
because
about Dale
I know
just a
he's your
little bit.
favorite.
I adore Dale Cooper. I was Dale Cooper for Halloween like 3 years ago. He is the ultimate Boy Scout, but there's also so much more to him. It's that kind of dichotomy of him being a very pure man, but also being involved in these very strange, horrific situations that I find so captivating about him. Similar to his character in Blue Velvet as well. But other than Dale Cooper, who I could talk about for hours, oh, there's so many, but the first one that comes to mind is Lucy.
Yeah.
I really love Lucy. I think she adds a lot to the show, despite not always being involved in the main plot lines. She's kind of the levity, her and Andy, that holds the show together at times, especially in the first 2 seasons. And other than Lucy, I am an Audrey Horne fanboy.
Now, I'm not going to talk about Judy, but what I'm actually not going to talk about is in great detail my history with Twin Peaks, because I feel like if you've been keeping up with the show, my show, Coffee Nick's Movie Picks, you basically heard my history with Twin Peaks. But this time around, I started watching in high school and I stopped before season 2 ended. So I never got to witness the return or the movie. Specifically, the return hadn't even been out at that point. But my history with this show goes back pretty far. So it has been lovely to return to this interest of mine. And I feel like I am so much more able to analyze and sort of pick up on different things about the show. Not everything, of course, because this is David Lynch we're talking about. But it has been a lovely experience witnessing the show and its characters so much. I would say that my favorite character is, of course, Dale, but my secondary favorite character is also Audrey. I love Audrey's character. She is just so dreamy, as she puts it, very mysterious, and I love her plot line. In season 3, they took her character to a very strange place, and I was not happy with it. I did not see where it was going until I saw where it was going, and I loved the ending they had for her character. So, with that being said, I don't think we can talk about Twin Peaks anymore without lifting the no spoilers environment for this conversation. So we are officially going to be talking freely about Twin Peaks spoilers. So if you have not seen it, I would go watch it and then come back to this episode. Also, we're going to be moving on to Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which is the official review for this episode. And I'm going to summarize it a little bit here. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is directed by David Lynch and follows the double life of Laura Palmer in the events leading up to her gruesome murder. As Laura starts to witness visions and pieces together who may be targeting her, her whole world seems to fall apart. Who will save her? Now, the first thing I want to talk about with Fire Walk with Me is just how interesting this is as a film and as a concept.
Yes.
This is a sequel to seasons 1 and 2. This is a prequel to seasons 1 and 2, but it also has different scenes that act as a sequel to season 2, and it also has some elements that are a precursor to season 3. So it's a prequel, it's a sequel, it's a prologue, it's an epilogue, and it's creative. It's not what you would think of when you think of like a film adaptation of a popular series. It takes it to a completely different environment, but also it promises audiences what they want to see, which I think is very rare for a David Lynch movie. He likes to subvert audiences' expectations, but he also, I think he shows us what people want to see for a Twin Peaks movie. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you were just saying about the film. I think it's such an interesting, complicated piece of work. From the get-go of the film, we're shown a blue TV screen. It's a TV static playing, and at the end of that, it's smashed and there's a scream. And I don't know if this is what David Lynch meant for it to be, but for me, it's always been him kind of shattering our expectations from the show that we were taking into the film. Going along with that, the very first act of the film is sort of a alternate version of the show that we're used to. By beginning the film in this manner, David Lynch subverts your expectations, but by the end of the film, I agree with what you're saying. I think we are given what we wanted going into the film. And something else that I find so interesting about this film being a prequel to the series is that the series is a mystery. The show is all about figuring out who the killer is. But at this point, we know who the killer is. So to go back and make a prequel about that is very unexpected and very different than a typical mystery plot would be. And I think that is what Fire Walk with Me is so special for. It's kind of shining a light on the killing and on the life behind the killing rather than just the killing itself.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that David Lynch exposed the murder because come to think of it, I think that audiences back in the day, when they hear, oh, there's a Twin Peaks movie coming out, they may have just thought that this movie would be like right after the events of season 2. At the end of season 2, Dale Cooper smashes his head against the mirror in his bathroom, and we, can assume that it's Evil Dale. It's not the good Dale that we know. Evil Dale made it out of the Black Lodge, and he's out basically. So, people might have been thinking that this would be about Evil Dale and how the good Dale makes it out and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, he subverts our expectations by showing us Laura's story instead. And I really like that he did that because I think in a lot of murder mystery type media, they kind of gloss over the murder itself and like the victim. So I think it's really admirable that Lynch shows us this story, especially because it is so traumatic. By watching this story, we learn that Laura was victim to extreme amounts of sexual assault and abuse. So just absolutely horrific things happening to this character. David Lynch could have continued the story right after with Dale Cooper and how he made it out of the lodge and everything, but instead he wanted us to witness this horrific story. He wanted to pay homage to Laura's character, and I'm glad he did that because it forces people to really think about it and know that there's, a life behind this victim. Because for most of Twin Peaks, Laura Palmer is just a picture frame. We just see her picture at the end of the credits and nothing else really. So it's also really satisfying to see Laura's character just alive and laughing and, a lot of it is sad and horrific, but there are moments where she actually is, a normal teenage girl, and that's really nice to see. And there is a very in-depth character here, so I'm so glad that David Lynch told her story because there is so much story to tell.
Agreed on all of that. And like what with what you're saying about how we get to see her as a real human being in this film. We see her in high school, we see her with her friends. We also see her struggling with this abuse that she can't ignore at any time. There's this one scene in the film where Laura comes to Donna's house after something horrific has happened to her, and she is sobbing. But rather than telling Donna what happened or just even explaining that she was in danger, she kind of calms herself down. And she realizes she doesn't want to bring Donna into it, which is something that comes up later in the film as well. And like what you're saying, I believe Laura is presented as this very nuanced character in the film, and which is interesting because even in the first two seasons, Lynch subverts our expectations on this idea of the dead girl. There's so many mysteries where a girl has died, and then she's almost painted at times in a sexualized light in a lot of other films. And she is, in a sense, in Twin Peaks, but that aspect of sexualization is danger. We even get this motif in Twin Peaks of she's the girl wrapped in plastic. She's almost this unreal archetype of a character, as she's first presented to us in the first two seasons. So seeing her, live her life really shows us a different side to the character that we haven't seen in the past.
Yeah, and I'm glad they did it. I want to talk about Donna a little bit. Donna in Fire Walk with Me is casted as someone completely different, but that's the least interesting thing about Donna in Fire Walk with Me. I think that Donna sort of unlocks this realization for me about Twin Peaks that pretty much everyone that we saw in the series had a secret. By watching the series, we would have never known that Donna had secrets, but watching the movie, we see that she was a witness to all of these things happening to Laura Palmer, and she never spoke to the police about it, even though she was asked so many times. So I really, I like that Donna, knowing Donna from the series, she's sort of like an investigative character. She likes to take things into her own hands. So it would make sense that Donna, like, followed Laura to this very dark side. The pink room scene where they're both like dancing with these creepy men and taking off their shirts and really being taken advantage of. It just horrible. Donna was there for that, and just by watching the series alone, we would have never known that about Donna's character. So I also like that this movie is exposing a different side to this character, and it's funny that a completely different person plays the character because we're almost seeing a completely different person. This is also the story of how Donna became the person she is in the series because it really does feel like two different people. We have like a very serious Donna in season 1 and 2, and in the movie, it's almost like a very naive and curious Donna. And then of course season 3 she's not mentioned whatsoever, which I don't know what that's about, but yeah.
Yeah, why wasn't she featured in season three? That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, she played no part.
Yeah, she did. But yeah, like with what you were saying, it's a very different portrayal than the Donna that we had met in seasons one and two. Even so much that the house is slightly different that she's living in than
Yes.
the first two seasons. I'm not sure what the situation was with Laura Flynn Boyle coming back to the film, but it seems like once Lynch realized that she couldn't be in the film, he kind of went even further with it and almost made them seem like completely separate characters in a sense, which is something that we see quite often in a David Lynch movie. We're used to seeing doppelgangers and several versions of people.
Yes.
Um, uh,
Especially in season 3 of Twin Peaks. It's almost
yes,
exclusively about doppelgangers running around everywhere. So,
everybody's
yeah.
got their Gemini double in Twin
Right.
Peaks.
Oh, yeah, we're both Geminis. Look at us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we've got our doppelganger out there.
Yeah, there's
It's a
a
little concerning.
good Nick running around there somewhere.
Yeah, Mr. In.
Yes, yes. Um,
But yeah, the pink room scene that you were just talking about is kind of what I was referencing earlier. I love the moment in that scene where Laura looks over and Donna is she's been stripped down and she's somewhat being taken advantage of by one of the men at the bar. So Laura, in that moment, a very bright light shines on her. A light similar to that we see in her room in one scene, but that we also see in the Red Room several times. It's this moment of realization for Laura, to me, it feels like, of her realizing that the life she's living, she doesn't want projected onto anybody else. Yet for herself, it's something she feels trapped in. In a lot of ways, that feels like what the film is about. There's the moment where Laura meets Log Lady, and Log Lady says something to her about when a fire like this begins, it's hard to stop, or something like that.
Yeah, and I think after that moment, we see Laura in the roadhouse, and that the only emotion to describe her in that moment is trapped. I think Laura knows and is choosing to live this very extreme double life, and she's trying to separate the characters from one double life from the other, but they blend together, and I think Donna was kind of caught in the crosshairs. Donna, I think Laura hopes that Donna stays on the good side, and then directly opposite of Donna is Ronette, sort of living in Laura's bad side. And I think it was interesting when these two characters come in contact, and Laura is shocked, and that's when the lights start flashing. So the pink room is almost like the non supernatural version of the red room. I think it's sort of an area of whenever we see the red room, there's always like something we learn from the characters, and it's very weird and experimental. So the pink room was almost like not experimental, not weird. It was almost so realistic in a horrifying way. And I think the red room is also home to many of the film's really excellent sequences. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about the portrayal of the Red Room and Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me is just how frequently we're in there as opposed to the first two seasons. In Fire Walk with Me, we really get to see what the Red Room is about and what David Lynch is exploring in that kind of liminal space. And much of what we see does involve these ideas of good and evil and sacrifice and life. We see characters like Laura and Dale there, but we also see Bob in this room. And it doesn't seem like it's meant for necessarily one intention.
Yeah, and I think that this is the place of revelation for characters most of the time. And specifically, I want to talk about the ending, and that takes place in the Red Room. And there's a lot of talk in the movie about like guardian angels. Laura seems to think that there won't be any angels there to save her. And I think the end of this film is so beautiful because in the Red Room, there is an angel there. And it's suggested that, Dale Cooper is sort of like her guardian angel. And he's too late in a way because she only goes to the red room after she's been killed, and she finds Dale Cooper there, and we see in season 3 basically what's going on with that, why she sees him there and what he does for her. But in the film, I like that these two characters who we've never even seen them meet before, they are basically put side by side, and it's stated that they have this beautiful relationship. It's sort of like a Pearl ending. Pearl came long after. It is a completely different story, but we see Laura just smiling so brightly into the camera, and there's again that flashing light on her. It's weird. What do you make of the ending and Laura's smile?
Yeah, I mean, so earlier in the film, we see that Laura has this painting on her wall, and there's an angel in the painting. So we're introduced to this image pretty early on in the film, as well as this discussion between Laura and Donna, where Donna asks Laura what she thinks it would be like to be flying out of control in space. And Laura says something along the lines of, "I believe you would be flying rapidly, and the angels would leave you because they're no longer there." She feels very tied into the ending of this film. I view Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me sort of as a character's path to self destruction in a lot of ways. Even though Laura obviously had many things working against her, things that were causing her own self destruction, that's not to put any of it on her at all. But I think when you're faced with such horror and such tragedy, self implosion is a pretty easy way to go.
Yeah,
Um,
she wants out.
she wants out. So after she realizes that her father is Bob, she kind of communicates that to Leland by telling her to leave her alone. And I think in that moment, she's almost accepted her fate. She knows there's nothing she could do. It's her father. And then later, that same day, I believe it is, she looks at the painting on her wall and the angel has faded away, which is such an incredible image, first off.
I didn't pick up on that.
Really? I
But
find it so
yeah,
sad.
because that scene happening and then the angel right after fading away, her fate has been sealed. She can't be saved anymore. It's so sad.
Yeah, or at the very least, she believes that. She believes that the angels have
Yeah.
left her. So then at the end, when she has Cooper on her side and she sees an angel, it's as if the angels haven't left her and there's still somebody protecting her in a way.
Yeah.
Even if it's her legacy and not her physical body, which I believe is why she has that reaction at the end. At the very least, she's not alone.
Yeah, and I think she realizes in that moment that maybe there is still hope for her. And that's something explored more in season 3, but we're talking about the movie.
The movie
What was I
is
going to
not a
say?
TV podcast. This is a movie podcast.
Uh-uh. Yeah, and I think Laura is a character who sort of knows what her fate is, and it's sort of about her accepting the fate and coping with the fate. I think there's a period of the film where she's in denial that this is happening, but like when she tells Leland to that she doesn't want to see him anymore, that's sort of like acceptance. That's the final stage. Because in the show, I know I said we're not talking about the show, but we're talking about it. In the show, a lot of characters when they are giving like confessionals about Laura, they seem to indicate that she knew she would be leaving, that she knew what her fate was. Not necessarily that she chose this fate, but she knew what was coming. So it's really a tragic story. But like we said earlier on, I'm just so appreciative that David Lynch selected this story to tell and that he exposed it so much, because I think the star of this show is its characters. I think this movie really, at its core, is a beautiful character study. So I think for me, the narrative and the characters are the highlight here. So moving on from those two things, let's talk about more of the technical aspects because I think there is a lot. It's David Lynch, so there's a lot of really cool technical aspects here. Are there any standout moments for you with technical stuff?
Oh wow. I mean, there's so many. A scene that stands out every time I watch it is the scene where Philip Jeffries returns to the FBI.
David Bowie,
David
played
Bowie.
by David
And
Bowie.
I think we need to have a discussion on if David Bowie's good or not in this film because I've
Yes, yes.
I've yet to form an opinion. I'm very charmed by his performance. The voice. The
It's like
voice.
a southern drawl. Very.
We're not gonna talk about Judy.
We're not gonna talk about Judy.
It's a choice. It's a choice for sure. But I do love it. But yes, that scene it's just a remarkable scene the way that it's done. Where it begins by Dale Cooper saying to Gordon that this is a date that he has been worried about because he's seen it in a dream, and he goes to the security cameras in the hallway several times. And the final time he does it, he himself is still in front of the camera while he's staring at the security cameras. So we're introduced with this strange, surreal moment, but before we can even really begin to understand what's happening there, David Bowie walks in, and
Philip
we're
Jeffries.
like, "Oh, okay, David Bowie is here now." And then we're surprised even more by one of the scariest scenes in cinematic history, in my opinion.
I would agree.
Yeah, the scene is intercut with all of these visuals of different entities above the convenience store, which, if you have seen the show, will make sense, but if you have not, it will not make any sense
The
at all.
convenience store is basically like Foster's home for imaginary friends, except all the friends are evil spirits.
Yes, not a
So,
7-Eleven, much darker than that.
yes.
Um,
Continue. I'm sorry.
yes, no, you are fine. But in that sequence, we were just showed all sorts of strange imagery and characters we've never seen before. And as I've seen the film several times now, my takeaway from that scene is that there are just all of these different forces working against Laura in a way. It kind of sets up what we're about to see, because that is the scene that comes prior to our hard cut to Twin Peaks and the Twin Peaks music.
Yeah, and at this point, we have not seen Laura or her story at all.
No, no. But that has to be one of my favorite scenes in the film. Another thing I love, and this is just a little thing in the movie, but the scene where they're in the pink room We can't hear any of the dialogue, but it's all subtitled. And that is just something I don't really think I've seen before, and I think is a really interesting technique in the film.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of gives more importance to the characters' emotions and reactions than it does the dialogue itself. Um,
Yeah, and I also think that subtitles are sort of because it's like supposed to be a parallel of the Red Room where they all talk backwards and it shows subtitles. I think, in this room, there's like music playing over them and they don't talk at all, but there are subtitles. So I think it's another way to just sort of depict this parallel, which I think is really cool. I would say my favorite technical aspect is also just the sequence with David Bowie. I really loved his performance. I thought it was fun. It was just a good time. But yeah, it was intercut with like all these images of like these terrifying spirits and this convenience store, which is a lot scarier than it sounds. And I think in this moment, there's also like the sound design is really important, and I think we'll talk about the soundtrack.
oh yeah.
But the sound design is really cool, and there's bits and pieces of like dialogue here. And one moment specifically, David Bowie says, "We're living in a dream." Watching this movie after seeing season three, I'm like, wow, this little sequence is almost the roadmap to the series. Um, you know, Kind of like all these people are sort of referencing Laura, but don't exactly know who Laura is. I think that's very cool. And I would say my other favorite moment, technically, is the train car sequence. There is almost this tune in the background that's operatic in a way. It's terrifying and it matches the tone very well. It's sort of like this pinnacle of the series is the murder of Laura Palmer. So I love that they added this soundtrack to sort of match that level of seriousness. But more specifically, in this scene, when Leland is wrapping Laura in the plastic, it cuts between Leland and Bob. It disorients the audiences, honestly. And I love the way the camera plays with Leland and Bob and sort of their duality. In one moment, even Laura becomes Bob. Leland shows her the mirror and she looks down and she's Bob. And, that's Bob's goal is to become Laura. And the moment, this is more narrative, not technical, but the moment when Leland realizes that Bob can't become Laura, which means Leland has to kill Laura. I think that's a really good moment for Leland's character as well. Not a good moment, but it's a very impactful moment for his character. So the technical and narrative go hand in hand here, as it should. It's a movie, but there are so many good moments. This is I've seen a few David Lynch films as of now, but so far this is his best. I love the technical elements here.
It is my favorite Lynch film, having now seen all of them but The Straight Story. I promise I'll watch it eventually, David Lynch. It seems very, very sweet. I'll get to it. I think it's on Disney Plus.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, right? I know.
I mean, they have poor things on Disney Plus now. They could
This
just
is
put
true.
anything on
This
there.
is true.
Let's see Eraserhead on Disney Plus.
But no, I love what you were saying about that scene. That scene is so just harrowing and unforgettable. The shot of Leland with Laura and Renette in front of him, and he's almost like walking them to the train car or running them to the train car, I've always found so unsettling. And very briefly, I do want to discuss the sound design and the
Yes,
music.
which David Lynch as far as I know, has a heavy hand
Yes.
in the sound design of his projects. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this was my Okay, this wasn't my first time seeing a David Lynch movie in theaters, but this was definitely the best the theater has been set up for one of his films. And the sound design while watching this movie was just so remarkable to me. The way that it takes you through the film, it really is like its own character in the movie. And also just the way that we hear Laura's screams several times throughout the
Yes.
film. I got goosebumps every single time it happened. And this is like my fourth or fifth time seeing the film now. And also, along with that, the use of score in the film, I think, is really memorable. We get this almost distorted, possibly reversed version of the original Twin Peaks score
Yes.
that plays throughout the film. And it just kind of it fits Fire Walk with Me in that it's this different version of the world that we're used to seeing. It's not the first two seasons where we get this very romantic,
Soapy.
operatic kind of music. This time around, it's much more of a horror score. I think it's really fitting the film itself.
Yeah, I love the score. Those reverse tracks are really stand out to me. And also, there's so many kind of like bits and pieces of like phrases that are spoken throughout the film, not by any particular character, but at one point we just hear like a whispered Judy, and then another point it shows the ceiling fan, which is sort of like an abstract symbol in Twin Peaks, is the ceiling fan, but we hear like all sorts of horrible things being said to Laura, like as she passes under the ceiling fan, and it's just adapted in such a way that it just doesn't even feel real. And I think that this is what David Lynch does best is he creates things that are sort of like from another dimension. I just don't even know how he conceived of them. It's great. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's an incredible score.
Now, we've been talking a lot about the second and third act, but there's almost an entirely different story happening here in the first act. So, we mentioned it briefly before, but the first act starts with entirely new characters that we haven't seen before. And the inciting incident for them is that they are tasked with the case for Teresa Banks, which is sort of like the murder that happened before Laura Palmer. And these two FBI agents, they almost have to go through like a bizarro world Twin Peaks in order to get what they want and to like investigate this case. And I really like the decision to start with these two characters because I think it gives us a lot more of the comedic relief. So, what did you think about the decision to start with entirely new characters?
Yeah, it's a very interesting choice, and I think that's probably why a lot of people had issues with the film back when it was first released, because it almost felt like it wasn't a continuation to begin with. But what I find so interesting about it is that that first act is very similar to the whole arc that we see in the first two seasons of Twin Peaks, where Teresa Banks.
It's
um,
Teresa Caputo. So, Teresa Caputo.
the Teresa Caputo. No, Teresa is found dead, and then the two agents come to investigate, like Nick said. But by the end of the first act, one of those agents vanishes. And it almost feels like David Lynch is setting up this kind of secular nature. And this is something we see come up again with Dale as well as Philip Jeffries. By doing that, it feels like Lynch is also exploring this theme that Laura is stuck in this cycle, and all of these women are kind of stuck in a cycle of sorts. But other than that, something I love about the first act is Lil. Lil is Gordon Cole's mother sister's girl, and she wears a red dress with a blue rose and does a little dance
She has a sour face.
and has a very sour face.
Yeah. But we
And
forgot to mention the uncle, and that means something.
that means something. What it means, I still
I
don't.
think it meant something like it's something to do with drugs,
They said he was in prison, I
something
think,
like that.
and I did not remember that lie.
Lil, forget everything we just talked about. Lil is the star of this show.
Yes, I can't believe we forgot to mention Lil
I
until
want to
this
see her
point.
story. We kind of have been analyzing this movie in reverse fashion because we started like with the ending, I feel like, and now we're here at the beginning.
Which is sort of appropriate for David Lynch, you
Honestly,
know?
I hope this episode will probably disorient you more than season 3 or Fire Walk with Me does. Lil is great. This movie's I would be comfortable saying that this movie also operates well as a comedy. It's a comedy that is extremely dark and has very somber moments, but there's like genuine laughs.
Yeah,
If you think of like Lil or Gobble Gobble,
gobble gobble.
there's some weird stuff in here that the theater was consistently laughing at.
Yes. I think in all of David Lynch's movies, as horrific as they get, there's always some sort of moment of levity, which
Yes.
is something I really appreciate about him. I think without it, it would be a little bit too much at times, and it wouldn't have the humanity that his movies do.
Yeah, I mean, he's a funny guy, I hear.
Oh, he is.
Yeah, he
He
has a good sense of
definitely
humor,
is.
which
He's a silly
we'll talk
guy.
about Cheryl Lee in a second and our Q&A with her, but she even mentioned that he has a great sense of humor. So I think he makes sure to put that in his work somehow. We saw it with like Andy and Lucy in the original series, and I think this movie I think all the characters shared having that sense of humor. Uh, and I think that was the interesting part about finally seeing this movie in theaters is everyone got to witness each other's reaction and realize like, oh, a lot of people are also laughing at this movie pretty consistently. And I like that it's not like a Marvel movie where it just feels kind of like cheap humor. It's genuine and it's just silly. I mean, this is a Twin Peaks can be a silly town with these grand characters. So I like that the humor was included
Yeah,
here too, because if not, it would just be such a depressing movie.
agreed.
Yeah.
It's definitely David Lynch's brand of humor, but the humor is definitely there throughout the film.
Yeah.
And in general, it was very exciting to see it with an audience who all had an appreciation for this movie. I think this movie has long held a certain reputation. When it first was released, it got booed at Cannes, and many people walked out. Quentin Tarantino was very unhappy with the film,
Yeah.
which is interesting. Um, but
Quentin
that's another
Tarantino.
podcast.
Quentin Tarantino. I don't even want to talk about him on my show. Oh God.
Let's not talk about
We're not gonna
Quentin.
talk about Judy. We're not talking about Judy.
Uh, um, but no, I think this film had a reputation for a long time as sort of being like trauma porn in a sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's been reevaluated over the last couple decades. And it was very nice to see a lot of people have this movie as something that means a lot to them, and it not just be viewed the way it once was. So,
And I think that that is a perfect segue to talk about our Q&A with Cheryl Lee. So I mentioned this earlier, but this Q&A was thanks to Alamo Drafthouse. We went to the Crystal City location, and we just spontaneously were like, oh, has Fire Walk With Me ever been shown in theaters before? And it was like, oh, yeah, there's a showing in April, and Cheryl Lee will be there for a Q&A. So we were like, okay, well, we're going. So we got to listen in on a Q&A with Cheryl Lee. She was there in person. We didn't ask any questions, but some really great questions were asked. And you were saying how just now how a lot of people thought that this story was just kind of trauma porn, but I really like Cheryl Lee just understands this character, through and through, of course. And she mentioned how this story is so important because it's happening everywhere and it's not being talked about. And she thinks that this story sort of brought this situation to light. Cheryl Lee said this specifically. Laura Palmer is a television character, but this is happening to real people. This is just a story about that. So I love that Cheryl Lee is using this character in this story to kind of highlight that this is a real issue. And while this is a fun show to watch and a lot of people get lost in like its creativity and everything, it is raising awareness for an issue.
yeah, and I think that's why both of us respond so much to this movie, and why I think it's both of our favorite Twin Peaks content, like
Yeah,
between the
yeah.
first two seasons, the third season, and this movie, because it feels like it's really about Laura and it's about the tragedy.
But talking a little bit more about Cheryl Lee,
Yes, yes.
she was just absolutely lovely. She is so sweet. She is so kind to her fans. She answered her questions so nicely, and she paid so much respect to the creative forces around her. A lot of questions were like, "Oh, how did you do this and this and this?" And she was like, "Well, I had an amazing team around me." And I think that's how you know that an actor is just a beautiful person. She's just so humble, and she really paid so much respect to David Lynch, Kyle
Yeah.
MacLachlan, all of her co-stars. She just had this sense of humility and was so kind-hearted. Just in the brief time we interacted with her. Yeah,
She was delightful. I mean, I was already in love with her, and I fell even more in love with her. She so sweet, so insightful about her performance on the show and what it was like to work on Twin Peaks. And I thought a lot of the questions that were asked were very interesting. What was it?
I did think it was funny how there was actually someone who came out before the Q&A that was like, "Hey guys, so just don't ask any questions about like what the truth is behind the story, and don't ask any questions about David Lynch." He walked out. They brought Cheryl Lee in. Yay, Cheryl Lee! And the first question: so we know that David Lynch is a clairvoyant director, and he just knows things that no one else knows, and he saw star quality, and he knew how to cast you, and he saw this potential in you. So how do you think he did? And I was like, "Are you for real?"
It was a lot. It was a lot to begin the Q&A.
Yeah, but that was the only question like that. The only like question about David Lynch, Lynch film
Yeah,
bro. Every other question I thought was great, and it was respectful to Miss Lee. Yeah,
I would agree for the most part.
yeah. There
There
was
was,
a lot of questions about like, oh yeah, trauma this and trauma that, and how
yeah,
did you? And there was so much focus on like,
that
how did you cope with the trauma of the show? I think, it kind of was beating a dead horse.
Yeah, and there was one question asking her where she like sourced a lot of the like the pain that she exhibited in the film. I would not want to discuss that if
Right.
I was an actor, because I'm
Yeah.
sure it comes from a very vulnerable place.
Yeah, because that's personal. Like talking
Yeah.
about where you bring this pain from,
But she
that was a
answered,
bit inappropriate.
yes, but she answered it very professionally, and once
Yes.
again,
Yes.
kind of referenced the real life traumas that many people have endured as
Yeah.
a reference point
I
for
mean,
her.
she is just so professional, and she is dedicated to these fans, these Twin Peaks fans. It must not be easy putting up with them. Um,
Oh, I'm sure.
but she is just was amazing.
Yeah.
And some fun things that she revealed to us actually was that she's seen this movie, what was it, twice?
Twice. So I believe she saw it when it was first released, and then not again until Twin Peaks: The Return was getting ready to film.
Yeah, and she described it as kind of like a homework watch where she was like, okay, I have to enter back into being Laura Palmer. I'm going to unlock the door to have her come back in. So I thought that was very interesting. And she also talked about how in Twin Peaks The Return, they were given given different scripts. And so basically, one character didn't know what the other characters were doing in this season. So she was excited to watch that just as much as any of the fans because she was learning what these characters were up to.
Yeah, which was so interesting. I can't
Yeah.
imagine working like that. And I think it's very understandable. She's only seen the movie a couple times. I can't
Yeah.
imagine having to watch myself go through what she goes through in that movie,
Yeah.
any more than that. But no, she was wonderful. I feel so lucky to have actually gotten to be in the same room with her.
I know.
And
It's
she
such a
means,
blessing.
yeah, and I think because she's so iconic as this character, she really means a lot to so many people, myself included. As much as I would love to see her in other films and series, um, it does feel like this role of Laura Palmer has kind of defined her as an actress in many ways.
Mhm.
And I don't say that as a negative. I mean that as like the ultimate positive. I
Yeah,
think,
because this is a Laura Palmer as a character that is, you know,
yeah,
tough to crack.
even when you asked me who my favorite characters on Twin Peaks, I kind of forgot to say Laura Palmer, who actually might be my favorite character in
Yeah,
Twin Peaks, because she is the show. She almost doesn't even feel like a character.
right. Laura is the one.
Yeah, Laura is the one. And she does such a terrific job at such a difficult character.
Yes, absolutely. Some other fun facts that Cheryl Lee revealed was that no one knew who the killer was until it was shot. And there was actually an alternative version of the show shot where Ben Horn was the killer. Not that that was ever the plan, but they shot that just to throw off the cast and crew so that no one basically would have the truth. Kind of very like Game of Thrones, RuPaul's Drag Race sort of
Exactly,
thing.
exactly.
So that was really interesting. Basically, David Lynch and Mark Frost brought Ray Wise, who plays Leland, Cheryl Lee, who plays Laura, and
Richard Beamer?
Richard Beamer, who plays Ben Horn. And so they brought them into this room, and David Lynch went to Ray Wise and was like, Ray, it's you. It's always been you. Cheryl Lee said that, yeah, she kind of knew that just because she is this character. She knew what this character had gone through, and it only made sense that, the perpetrator is her father. And, it's not just a murder. There was so many other horrific things happening.
I found this interesting as somebody who works within the film industry. But she discussed what she does at the end of any production. She kind of just goes on a long drive and goes somewhere, and kind of takes a trip for herself, just to get away. And I found that really interesting. You know, in film production, you work these really long weeks. You work 60 to 80 hours, depending on the size of the film. And it really does become your life while you're working on it. I mean, you're around the same people for an insane amount of time. And I can't even imagine what that's like to be an actor, not just part of the crew. When you're in this different persona for that long. So no, I just found that to be really interesting and made a lot of sense to me.
So thank you, Cheryl Lee, for this amazing Q&A. If you're listening, it was so lovely to get to meet her. Also, we got like signed. I got a signed picture. Harrison got his signed Criterion collection of Firewalk with Me, and we also just got to talk to her. And she, face to face, just she's so sweet, and
So wonderful.
that it translates to like her personal conversations too. So
Thank you, Cheryl Lee.
and thank you, Alamo Drafthouse, for the experience because this really was, a really great movie watching experience. So
It really was. And thank you so much, Nick, for having me on the pod.
Yes,
It's been an honor.
yes,
Um,
thank you.
I have been very excited to be a part of this since you first launched it. And all I've ever wanted to do is talk about movies to people.
Yeah.
So I was made for this.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. I value your movie insight and your insider knowledge and your analytical skills about movies so much. So it's really an honor to have you on the podcast because you have so much more movie and film knowledge than I do, and you talk about it all so eloquently. So thank you so much for gracing this podcast. And you're a Twin Peaks fan, and I need you here to talk about it because I don't know what the hell is happening on that show. So once again, thank you for being here, Harrison, and I hope to have you back in the very near future.
Oh, of course. Well, thank you so much for having me.
But before you go, what's the rating for Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me?
I think it's a Nick pick.
A Nick pick?
I think it's the Nick pick.
It's a damn fine cup of coffee, if I do say so myself. So
Yeah.
with that being said, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me gets the Nick pick. As a concept alone, Fire Walk with Me is a masterclass in creativity, respect for source material, and creative risk. Then, when adding in the excellent performances, chilling narrative, and thrilling technical aspects, it's easy for me to consider this film one of the best ever made. Nowhere else can you find a film adapted from a TV series that successfully subverts audiences' expectations, develops a compelling identity separate from its source material, and serves as a prologue to the original material, as well as a sequel. That's just Twin Peaks. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for tuning into this extra special episode of Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. And once again, thank you so much to Harrison for joining me on this episode. I can't wait to have you back again soon. If you like what you heard, please be sure to subscribe and give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Follow the show's social media and share the show with a friend. I would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, my log does not judge. Whatever that means. I'll see you then. Thanks again for listening to Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Our opening theme is Summer Solstice on the June Planet by Bail Bonds. Our closing theme is I Feel It All So Deeply, also by Bail Bonds. Before you go, don't forget to give Coffee Nick's Movie Picks the Nick's Pick by subscribing and rating us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Coffee Nick's Movie Picks on Instagram, X, and TikTok at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks. Again, that's at Coffee Nick's Movie Picks.